Hi, I'm James.
And I'm Antony.
And this is Words and Numbers.
We have a new sponsor, the Center for American Culture and Ideas. Why don't we take a minute to tell the listeners what they do there?
We're concerned with culture and ideas here in America. It's headed by Dan Asia, who is an American composer. We also have an art historian, Robert Gordon, and another composer, Joshua Nichols. And they're concerned with the effect that culture has on the individual. And their approach, I think, is a very, very good one. The common belief is that politics is downstream of culture, that culture is first and politics comes second. And if you want to affect a change of any kind, you better address the culture. Don't get all caught up in the politics. And I think that's fundamentally the correct way to look at things.
In my years of dealing with you, I've come to that realization. Never would have occurred to me until you pointed out, look at the major changes that have occurred in politics in this country. And I mean like the landmark things, the Civil Rights Act, going back to the 1920s, 1930s, the National Labor Relations Act, which purportedly established the 40-hour work week, put an end to child labor. All of these things, most recently, legalization of gay marriage, legalization of marijuana. In every one of those cases, your tendency is to say, well, look, politics stepped in and made a necessary change to society. Yet in every one of those cases, if you look at the data, society changed first. The law came in later.
Not only first, considerably before.
In the case of the National Labor Relations Act, the 40-hour work week and the end of child labor had pretty well been established a full decade before the NRLA ever became law.
Isn't that wonderful when you think through what that really means? It means that, generally speaking, there doesn't have to be a ham-fisted government program to make sure something good happens. Something good generally happens, and then there's a government program giving it its blessing.
That's right. So beware of the politicians who say they're going to fix things. No, actually, they don't. All they do is respond to what society has already deemed is the new reality.
Right, and sometimes things get fixed in the culture and sometimes they don't.
Yeah, well, that's part of the messiness of the human condition.
That's right, and be that as it may, culture is what matters. I should say that's my take on culture. The khaki take on culture is a little different. They're concerned further still with high culture.
What does that mean, high culture? Like the snooty stuff?
Yes, Antony, the snooty stuff. Let's stop there and have one of them come on and explain to you what the snooty stuff is all about. Anyway.
I've been noticing for some time that with all of the advances that we have in electronics, the thing that tends to lag is battery technology. Batteries are markedly better than they were 2-3 decades ago, but not as markedly better as computers are, memory storage is. Those things are just light years beyond where they were 2 or 3 decades ago.
If batteries were as much better as memory storage is, I'd be able to use my laptop for a week and a half without ever charging it.
Right, yeah, and the electric cars would run on something the size of a brick.
That's right.
Well, I've been noticing articles over the past several weeks, maybe a couple of months, about advances not at the consumer level, but at the level of the laboratory in batteries. The latest, NASA may have just cracked the code for replacing lithium in batteries. The lithium in the battery is the thing that you see these batteries from time to time exploding and throwing off flames and all of that stuff. It's why the TSA requires you to pack your rechargeables in your luggage rather than taking them on the plane itself in carry-on. This new technology, apparently, which I underline again is still in the lab, purportedly does away with that liquid stuff. NASA has an acronym for it. The acronym is SABRES, Solid-State Architecture Batteries for Enhanced Rechargeability and Safety. Apparently, this new technology, it's solid state and can store twice as much energy in a much smaller and lighter package than current lithium batteries. And this is coming about, for people who would be in favor of government funding of research, this is coming about from government money going to NASA, and NASA is trying to figure out how to build batteries light enough that have enough storage that they'd be useful in electric planes. You can see the problems. And the claim is that carbon from air travel accounts for about 2% of all greenhouse gas. So the story here is, if indeed NASA is successful in this, and it seems to be that they're making great strides, we've got the opportunity to significantly reduce carbon emissions from airplanes. And again, anyone who points to the benefits of government investing in research and development would point to this and say that's a great thing. And I would say, yes, indeed, it is a great thing. But all economists will go on and ask the next question. But what could we have done with that money had we not put it here?
You never know.
And I don't know. Are there other endeavors that emit more global greenhouse gas than air travel, such that this money invested there would have had a greater impact than investing it in the battery technology?
You never know.
And I don't know that. And the fact is the politicians don't know either. But you know who does know, or I should say who's more likely to figure out the answer? Private investors, people who put their own money on the line. They have a greater incentive than anyone else to spend that money, to invest that money well. So is this good news? Yes, it's good news. Is it the best news? I don't know. My guess is it isn't.
Well, speaking of investing, I want to talk about the Powerball.
You know, I used to get calls from the media every time the Powerball passed some number ending in 0. They all stopped calling me about 10 years ago, and I think they stopped calling me because my answer was always, you'll do much better not buying the lottery tickets and putting your money in the stock market instead.
Well, that might or might not be true, but I want to go Powerball by the numbers because the jackpot right now is $785 million.
$750 million.
Yeah, $750 million. And because it's so high, the number will go up as people buy more tickets towards the end of the cycle.
Right.
Now, your odds of winning the Powerball are 1 in 292 million.
Okay, that sounds about right.
Okay, it makes sense to play. Once you pass a $292 million jackpot, it actually makes mathematical sense to give it a shot.
Well, yes and no. On average, the average ticket will win. I don't know how these numbers come about. 292, call it 300 million tickets sold on a prize of 700 some billion dollars. On average, each ticket is a winner. I'll put a big footnote and I'll come back to that in a minute. But to come close to approximating that on average, each ticket is a winner, you'd have to buy millions of tickets.
You'd have to buy 300 million tickets.
Well, to start to feel the effects, maybe not that much, but you'd have to buy millions of tickets to start to feel the effects. But here's the big footnote. The government's going to tax that to the tune of about 50%, if not more.
That's just the thing, right? Because after you win, if you do, you have to pay 24% on top to the federal government, but that's only what they withhold. You got to come up with another 13% after that to get square with Uncle Sam. So you're at 37%, and now all of a sudden you're under 500 million, $500 million.
And you haven't counted state and local taxes.
That's right. You haven't counted those either. So we're probably nearly back to an even money proposition here.
Let me throw out one more thing, which is that 700 million. You would not get that all at once. That comes out in payments over a period of 20 years. If you want it all at once, they'll give you about half of it.
Yeah, they give you less.
So you're not talking 700 million, you're talking 350 million, and then you take off the 37% tax.
Yeah, it might not be worth it to buy that ticket after all.
Yes, the House always wins.
The House does, in fact, always win. And when the House is the government, boy, does it always win. But isn't it nice to go spend a couple of bucks and think about $750 million in your bank account just for a couple of minutes?
You know, I think there's something important to what you just said, and it's worth circling back to at some future point because I think it ties into the idea of culture, and that is the incredible power of hope, the ability to hope, to dream, just for a couple of days until the winner is picked. I think that's a huge factor in helping people to get from one day to the next.
I think it's the only reason people buy lotto tickets.
Yeah.
The amounts are so fantastic that most people know they're never going to win. Everybody knows they're not going to win, but there's just that scintilla of a whiff of a hope of a chance, right?
Right. But you just might.
And for a couple of bucks, why not? I wouldn't spend $100 on a lottery ticket. I'd spend $2. It's just permission to daydream is all it is.
It is. In fact, that used to be the motto of the Pennsylvania State Lottery. You've got to play to win. If you don't play, there's no chance of you winning. To which I responded, yeah, but you also have to play to lose. If you don't play, you're definitely not losing.
Aren't you exactly what they were looking for?
And they stopped calling.
To get some commentary on the latest and the greatest with the lottery. This, of course, Ant, brings us to the foolishness of the week. And Joe Biden's been getting a free pass for quite some time, and I want to rectify that right now because our fearless leader, Joe Biden, has recently claimed that he has visited the site of every mass shooting in the United States.
Really? That tells me either A, he's lying, or B, which I think is more likely, there aren't that many sites of mass shootings in the U.S.
Well, that's the problem, because we're always going to have to go back to definitions. And those on the political left in this country would have us believe that there are quite a number of mass shootings. And I give you an ABC News article from September 4th, just a few weeks back, that uses the Gun Violence Archive and concludes that there have been 484 mass shootings so far this year. This year. So more than one a day. And Joe Biden apparently thinks he's gone to visit every one of these sites.
Yeah, I don't have the numbers at the top of my head. That does not seem egregiously large, but does seem large.
It's ridiculously large only because they don't really define mass shooting in a way that anybody would understand a mass shooting.
Really? Do they give a definition there?
Well, there are definitions. The definition is very typically a shooting in which a number of people are injured or killed. When we think mass shooting, what we typically think is some lunatic shooting up a school, or the Las Vegas shooting where somebody just shoots indiscriminately into a crowd of people, killing people.
Right.
What we don't typically think of is a drug deal gone bad, where 3 drug dealers are shot and killed on a street corner somewhere. But that fits the definition of a mass shooting.
The FBI definition, and they don't use the term mass shooting, but their definition is, I believe, 3 or more people killed at the same instance.
I understand that there's a difficulty here in coming up with a definition that would satisfy what we're trying to accomplish with a definition. But when you say that there have been 500 mass shootings in the United States this year, I already know that the definition we're working with is not a good one.
Right, because people's minds immediately go to 500 school shootings or 500 Las Vegas-style shootings. That's definitely not what's going on.
Exactly right, and that's not going on at all. So we've got this problem, and I don't know what the problem is, but this nonsense has to stop. This makes it worse, not better. And here's the proof that politicians aren't looking to make it better. They're looking to capitalize on things. And if you want to capitalize on mass shootings, congratulations. You're a terrible person. I don't care if you want to be president or whatever. You're an awful person if you look at this phenomenon and think, oh, I can make that work for me. And here we are. So, no, Joe Biden didn't go visit every site of every mass shooting, at least not how Joe Biden defines mass shooting.
For one-stop shopping for all things James and Ant, visit our website, wordsandnumbers.org. We give a special shout-out to our Patreon sponsors who help us keep the lights on. If you'd like to contribute, go to patreon.com/wordsandnumbers. One of our listeners sent me a video by Robert Reich.
That man has succeeded so far past his abilities, I don't understand how he's done it.
Well, he's one of these people that people point to and say he's an economist because he had a job that would normally be held by an economist. He's not. He's a lawyer.
And it shows. Not that I want to disparage lawyers, but Robert Reich never knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, and unfortunately, he talks a good game. So if the listener doesn't know what he's talking about either, it sounds reasonable.
Well, he's back at it again. I saw the video you're talking about, too.
Yeah, this is a short 3-minute video.
At the risk of making him more popular or getting him more clicks than he deserves, we're going to leave it in the show notes for you.
Actually, it's worth looking at because you can see what he does. He's making an appeal to emotion here and gets the viewer all riled up. And it's not unless you think through the things we're going to talk about now that you realize that everything he's saying is nonsense. His premise is that Social Security at its root is unequal because the rich pay a smaller fraction of their income into Social Security than the poor do.
Let's be clear, that's correct.
It is correct, but it's what we call a mathematical artifact. And by that we mean it's true because of the way the math works, not because of malfeasance or behavior that's going on in the background. For example, Bill Gates' subscription to Netflix is $20 a month. Your subscription to Netflix is $20 a month. As a fraction of your income, your subscription to Netflix is much more expensive than Bill Gates. But it has nothing to do with the fact...
Oh, the injustice.
It's not that somebody's charging you more for Netflix. It's simply that you're dividing $20 by a larger number when you talk about Bill Gates. That's all.
And this comes up in Social Security because there's a cap on what self-employed people pay.
There is. And one of the things that people don't realize with this cap is that the cap works in two directions. You pay Social Security tax on the first $160,000, $180,000. And anything beyond that, you don't pay Social Security tax. But when you retire, your benefits are calculated based on that $160,000. So if you earn, let's say, $500,000, when you retire, you're treated as if you had earned $160,000. So the cap works on both the benefits and the tax side.
And this is the part that Robert Reich casually omit when they start talking about the injustice of Social Security.
They completely ignore the cap on benefits. They say, let's get rid of the cap, only talking about the one side of it. But I think there's something even more going on here, and that is the way in which he looked at the problem, saying how much do you pay as a fraction of your income, is the wrong approach. It's completely irrelevant. From a person's perspective, Social Security is like an investment. You pay money into it, and later on you get money back. And the right question is, how does what you get back compare to what you pay in? That's the question we should be asking.
The question we should be asking, put more bluntly, is this a good investment?
Yeah. The answer there is no across the board.
Every idiot knows the answer is no. And you're not going to make it a better investment by soaking people for more money.
Yeah, that's correct.
You're going to make it a better investment by changing the system, which is not going to happen.
But it turns out that Reich does get something correct here, and that is that there is inequality in the Social Security system, but it goes in the opposite direction that he claims. When you compare what you pay in to what you get back, the inequality is in favor of the poor.
Well, with one giant exception, yes.
Oh, you're talking about races?
I am.
Yeah. There are big differences across races, largely because of the longevity. The lesser your life expectancy, the less you can expect to get back.
That's right. If you can't retire until age 67, and yet demographically you're not going to live to the age of 67, if you want to look for the inequality baked into the system, that's where you're going to find it.
Yeah, we don't talk very much about the death tax on Words and Numbers. I think maybe we did one episode on it. But people get all bent out of shape about the death tax and rich should be paying their fair share and all of that. And one of the things that people fail to recognize is that your Social Security benefits come with a 100% death tax. You can die the day that you retire, and all of those benefits, they're gone, with a footnote that if you have a wife or kids, they might go to that. But if you don't have a wife or kids, you have an estate, nope, all gone.
It's not like you're going to be able to leave that to the charity of your choice.
Right. You can't leave it to your adult children, for example.
Which you could absolutely do with any private account.
Yes.
So when people say that private accounts are somehow evil, what they're really saying is your money belongs to the government.
Yeah, and that's something that I keep smelling this below the surface in all of these arguments about inequality, that somehow what you own isn't really yours, but rather the government is allowing you to have it.
I think that's exactly the right way to put it. You have it by dint of government compassion.
Right, yes.
And with Social Security, that's literally true. There is no legal requirement on the part of the United States government even to pay Social Security to the people who are alive.
That's correct. There is no legal obligation. Now, there's a huge political obligation.
Political, and you can make the case that there's a moral obligation too, but the Supreme Court has said very clearly that this is a tax like any other tax. It gets taken in, and then it's the government's. And they do whatever they want with it.
Right.
And here's the thing. This is why we're talking about it, and this is why we talk about it so often. That's precisely what the government does. Everybody thinks that all this money is sitting in a savings account somewhere at a bank.
Nope.
There's nothing but a big fat IOU in the Social Security Trust Fund.
Yeah, as soon as the money comes in, it turns around and goes right back out again.
Imagine that a government might behave in that way. Imagine that that's how it works. You can't trust a politician to hold a single dollar in his hand without spending it. You can't.
Do you remember back when Al Gore was talking about if we elect him, he'll put a lockbox on Social Security? I don't know what he was talking about.
Well, he didn't know what he was talking about either. He just knew that people liked hearing the phrase lockbox.
Right.
There's no such thing. When politicians are involved, they will raid any funding source to pay for whatever it is they want to pay for right now.
Plus or minus, they borrowed $10 trillion out of the Social Security Trust Fund. I don't mean that they borrowed $10 trillion of what's there. That's the entirety of what was there.
They borrowed the $10 trillion. But don't worry about it, Ant. That's not really a debt. That's just money we owe ourselves.
Right. Money we owe ourselves. How about that? There is no we here. It's money that some of us owe to others of us. If you follow that argument, then on planet Earth there is no debt, because everyone on planet Earth who owes money owes it to somebody else on planet Earth. Therefore, all the debt is money we owe ourselves. Therefore, magically, nobody on Earth is in debt.
No debt whatsoever, right?
Right.
That's right. I mean, look, let's be very clear about this. This is money owed to retirees. And when the government says, or members of the government say, this is money we owe ourselves, they're trying to get you to look away from the actual human beings who are owed this money.
Yeah.
That's what's really happening here. This is sleight of hand.
Yes. Well, here's a really good analogy that I think fits perfectly. And that is, you're in a family and you're a kid in the family and the parents have been saving up for your college education. And there's, let's say, $50,000 in there. And the parents decide to borrow that $50,000 and go on a spending spree. They go on a trip to Jamaica, the whole thing, right? And you start to complain. You say, but what happens when I go to college? There's no money in there. There's only an IOU. And the parents say, well, don't worry about it, because as a family, that $50,000 is just money we owe each other.
Yeah, that's right.
That doesn't change the fact that when it comes time to pay your tuition, there's nothing there.
Casually overlooking the fact that the bill will come and you can't pay it.
Yeah.
Look, you and I have been quite critical of Social Security, and I think rightfully so, for a very long time. And yet, I'm going to say things that will probably shock our listeners, but these are promises that have been made to the American people. And promises need to be kept. It doesn't matter if it's a bad idea. You can't not keep a promise until you can deliver the same benefit in a better way. And you and I have offered some answers to that question. We figured out how you could, in fact, deliver these benefits in a better way. We've done this a couple of times over the years.
Yeah, and we aren't suggesting that we keep Social Security.
No.
But rather, there is a way to shut the thing down, yet keep the promises to the people who are currently retired.
That's right. It can be phased out honorably without watching human beings starve to death, which is one of the reasons why we have this program in the first place.
Yeah.
So all of that notwithstanding, we still can't pay the bill. The problem is still sitting right there. The bill is coming due, and we can't pay it.
And we've made arguments in other episodes about how you can fix this. The fact is, it's not going to get fixed, not in that way. How it gets fixed, I don't know. My strong suspicion is politicians will do everything they can to kick this problem as far into the future as they can. The problem is, at the moment, future is approximately 7 years.
I think you see the hint of an answer with Robert Reich's little video fiasco.
Yeah.
When he starts going on and on and on about how there's inequality baked into the Social Security, and it works in the opposite direction of reality. But nonetheless, he makes the political case that the rich are somehow benefiting on the backs of the poor. Demonstrably incorrect, but trust me, people are going to buy it.
Yep, they're going to buy it, and they're going to say, we need to increase the tax on the rich, remove the cap. And here's what that's going to do.
Well, that's not what's going to happen, though. What's going to happen is that this argument is going to get out of control, and the rich aren't going to get Social Security at all. And then they're going to be told, even though they're not getting it, they have to pay more for it.
Possibly.
That's what's going to happen.
That doesn't solve our problem. It solves a politician's problem, because that will extend Social Security's life by how much, I don't know, maybe several decades, but it's going to extend Social Security's life enough that current politicians now don't have to sweat it. By the time it becomes a real problem again, they'll be long gone. But here's the thing. When it does, and it will become a real problem again, it will be way larger than it is now. And there'll be no rich people there that you can say, okay, here's who we're going to tax this time. They're going to turn to the middle class and say, you all should not get Social Security.
It's always the middle class. Why? Because there's so many of them.
Yeah. I want to go through a couple of numbers here because I'm taking seriously Reich's complaint that there's an inequality in Social Security, but I want to analyze it the correct way. The correct way to analyze it is to ask, how much do you pay in versus what you get back? And I'm going to take a hypothetical person who starts working at age 25, receives constant 3% raises, retires at age 67, dies at age 80. So that's constant over this whole analysis. Start working at 25, retire at age 67, die at age 80. Now, let's suppose this person starts working at age 25, earning $20,000, right? Low income. $20,000, he gets his 3% raises every year, on and on. Over the course of his career, he will have paid in a little over $200,000 in Social Security taxes and receive back, over the course of the remainder of his life, $545,000. So he'll receive back $2.70 for every dollar he paid in. That's the guy at $20,000. And what about somebody at $40,000? He starts at age 25, he's earning $40,000. So he's coming in lower middle class maybe, right? He's going to pay in $407,000 and receive back in retirement $794. He's going to get back $2 for every one he paid in. So the poor guy gets back $2.70 for every dollar he puts in. The lower middle class guy gets back only $2 for every dollar he puts in. And you can keep on going. Let me take an extreme case. Someone who graduates from Harvard, MBA, something, starts at age 25 earning $300,000, right? Top 1% here. This guy, over the course of his career, will pay in $3.1 million and receive back $1.8. In other words, he'll get back 60 cents for every dollar he pays in. Social Security is indeed unequal. It's unequal in favor of the poor.
That's not a story that's going to help Robert Reich at all.
Oh, no. And it's not going to get people mad, which is what he's looking to do, right? He's making a political statement.
Well, if you watch the video, you see him relaxing on a beach with a drink in his hand, getting a tan.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it's not like he's sitting behind a desk in a jacket and tie.
Yeah.
The setting of the video tries to tug at your emotions. Policy wonks go straight to your emotions every time without fail. They're lying. If the argument doesn't stand on its own, they go to emotion. There's no mystery as to what's happening here. And knowing Reich's history, there's no mystery there either.
His history's amazing. I've seen maybe a dozen of his videos over the years, and every single one has some serious, fundamental Principles 101 level economic error to it.
If you told me that he and Paul Krugman were the same person, I'd have to think about that for a minute. Have I ever seen them in the room together?
The guy with the Nobel Prize and the guy who has no education in economics, yeah.
Well, they make the same sorts of errors, and they make the same sorts of errors because they allow their political beliefs to determine their preferred outcomes.
Right, yes.
They don't start by saying, what's reality? They start by saying, what would I prefer reality to be?
Right. What's the policy I want?
And therein lies the problem. I think you and I work against this in our own brains significantly because we have very clear preferred policy outcomes. And yet sometimes the facts don't yield our preferences.
Right.
It just doesn't work that way. So I think you have to be vigilant, and I think we are vigilant, and even we, I think, fail from time to time at this.
And that's where an open mind is necessary, because there's someone out there who's going to disagree with you who has it right, and you got to be ready to listen to that argument.
I think ultimately that's correct, and it's this sort of lying that you get out of them so they can have their preferred outcome, which in this case would be a more fully funded Social Security program funded on the backs of the rich. That's the preferred outcome.
Yeah.
Well, is that a good idea? Why is that a question that didn't get asked first?
Right. And why can't we just be honest about it?
Well, that would be helpful too, but when you say honest, and that ship has sailed. I'm not looking for politicians to be honest with me. But I am hoping that you and I can be honest about it, figure out what they're actually up to, and get the word out a little bit. I guess that's the best we can do. And that's all the time we've got this week on Words and Numbers. Until next time, be sure to follow us on Twitter. Handles are in the show notes. Join Words and Numbers Backstage, the Facebook group where the conversation continues, and
send us email, wordsandnumberspodcast@gmail.com.
Until next week, try to be nice to one person who doesn't deserve it. Just one. And who knows, it may turn into a trend. Give it a shot. You might feel good about yourself.
You could say you tried.
You tried, that's right. Till next week, can't take it easy.
See you next week, James.